Harry Potter isn't the witch you should be concerned about. Let's look at 1 Samuel 15:23. It says, "Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. So because you have rejected the command of the Lord, he has rejected you as king." Now, whenever I would read this verse, I always had a hard time relating witchcraft to rebellion. I couldn't figure out what they had to do with each other. And I really didn't think it mattered anyway, because witchcraft is pretty uncommon in today's world, right? I mean, I know that witchcraft is bad, but quite honestly, when I think of witchcraft, I think of Harry Potter, and I couldn't tell the difference between the sorcery in Harry Potter and the same kind of sorcery in The Lord of the Rings. You know, Harry Potter is derided as this great evil being thrust upon our children under the guise of literature, and The Lord of the Rings is this masterpiece of Christian fiction. And so now you have witchcraft, you have rebellion. Harry Potter's bad, but Gandalf good. Kind of thought it was all just fantasy anyway, and altogether just didn't get it. One day I was reading an author by the name of Derek Prince, who said that witchcraft is basically any attempt to control another person by manipulation and intimidation with the goal of domination. This definition of witchcraft made a lot more sense to me, probably because it focuses on what the end result is instead of on the means. You know, since I was just considering the riding of the brooms and the magical incantations and all of these things, that's what I pictured as witchcraft. But what I really need to consider is what was the end result that the witch is looking for. It's always to control. It's always to dominate. It's always to catch the magical spell to get their way. So witchcraft is really just setting yourself up as king in rebellion to God and demanding of others that your will be done. When you look at witchcraft like this, you actually come to the realization that it's actually a very common thing. It's very common to see people trying to force their will on other people, and even aggressively so. And this nature of witchcraft, to try to change other people's wills with aggression, brought to my mind another idea. As a student of liberty and the liberty philosophy, there is an idea within the liberty philosophy called the non-aggression principle. According to the non-aggression principle, any unsolicited actions of others that physically affect an individual's property, including that person's body, no matter if the result of those actions is damaging, beneficiary, or neutral to the owner, are considered violent when they are against the owner's free will and interfere with his right to self-determination. This definition of violence might surprise you somewhat. It surprised me when I first came across it. I typically thought of violence as simply brute force. But according to the non-aggression principle, violence is any unsolicited action that physically affects another person or their property, even if we believe it may result in their benefit. So if we take these two concepts and put them together, this idea of witchcraft and the idea of the non-aggression principle, we can come to a pretty simple conclusion, that the initiation of violence is a form of witchcraft. Christians in America are suffering from a dangerous delusion. Actually, we're suffering from a lot of dangerous delusions, but I think that this one is fundamental. We're real eager to applaud ourselves when we abstain from Harry Potter novels and cry out about how ungodly they are and how this witchcraft is destroying our children, but at the same time, we're living in a way that condones statements such as this one by Rick Santorum.
Don't give me this idea that, I hear this, you're a moralist, you're trying to impose your values. Everybody's trying to impose their values. That's what America's about.
The key word in his statement is the word impose. The word impose, the definition of it is to put or set by or as if by authority, to impose one's personal preference on others. In order to impose, you have to assume authority. You have to set yourself up as king and then demand that your will be done. This is witchcraft, and especially so when violence is justified in its application. When we're talking about Rick Santorum, he is saying that this is what America is all about. America is all about taking government power and forcing your values on other people. So America, in his mind, is all about witchcraft. I don't buy it. Now, for this statement to be one that's not of witchcraft, we have to change the word from impose to persuade. Persuade, that definition of the word persuade, is to induce to believe by appealing to reason or understanding, to convince. Now, if you use violence to persuade, your persuasion is forfeited. With violence, the other party is not submitting because of an act of their will. They're not voluntarily submitting. They're submitting because you're forcing them to. They're submitting because of an act of witchcraft. The cartoonization of witchcraft by Harry Potter and the like have served as a convenient distraction and a scapegoat to hide the blatant fact that's proved by statements such as the one by Rick Santorum that we have become a nation of witches in rebellion to God. When we desire to convince someone to change, we no longer appeal to reason. We no longer appeal to our respect for each person's individual humanity or freedom or personal responsibility. Instead, we're like a coven of gaggling hags. We rally around a self-congratulating moral propaganda and in pursuit of our will have no qualms with resorting not only to unsolicited acts of benevolent and preventative violence, but even to the brutality of war. We don't have a right to impose our beliefs on others. It's witchcraft. It shows a disregard for human dignity, and it is also disobedience to the will and authority of God. When combined with a stubborn, prideful superiority, what is created is this idolic doctrine that perpetuates itself through these emotional appeals to patriotic platitudes as we marginalize the unrighteous among us who become the targets of our imposition. We may fool ourselves for a while by redefining words in order to create the illusion that we despise evil and that our actions are good. But sooner or later, truth always becomes evident, and it also demands obedience. Harry Potter is not the witch we should be concerned about. He, just like Gandolf the Grey, is a sorcerer of fantasy. We're to enjoy them within the realm of imagination. In reality, our ignorance to the witchcraft we practice daily is wreaking havoc on our families, our communities, and its cancer is spreading to affect even our nation's policies towards other cultures, resulting in bloody and expensive wars. The patriot and statesman Ron Paul says if we believe strongly in our ideals, the best way to spread them is to set a good example so that others will voluntarily emulate us. Force will not work. Jesus said in Luke 6:31, "Do unto others as you would have them do to you." At a recent presidential debate, when Ron Paul brought up the idea of even considering this teaching of Jesus with regard to our foreign policy, he was booed into silence. Tell me this isn't proof that we have become a nation of witches.
So I would say that maybe we ought to consider a golden rule in foreign policy. Don't do to other nations what we don't want to have them do to us.
Let's go back to our Bible verse in 1 Samuel. Rebellion is as sinful as witchcraft, and stubbornness as bad as worshiping idols. So because you have rejected the command of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. In my mind, we really only have two choices. We can continue in our rebellion. We can continue in our witchcraft, and we can create a doctrine around it, and we can defend it, and we can become stubborn in face of the truth, in face of the fact that it isn't working. We can set it up as an idol and worship it. But if we do, God will reject us. The other option is to repent of this witchcraft, to repent of this rebellion, to repent of this stubbornness. Now is the time to repent. The sooner we do it, the less painful the correction will be. The longer we sow violence into the world, the more violence we are going to reap in the future. Let's repent of witchcraft. Let's turn back to the philosophies of liberty that are our nation's foundations. And from there, let's emulate the goodness that is at the true core of who we are.